Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast. Learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Dr. Yoho, a healthcare whistleblower. He recently published 2 books about medical corruption, Butchered by Healthcare and Hormone Secrets. He had a surgical practice in the United States until retirement 3 years ago. Dr. Yoho now writes and speaks about COVID and vaccine fraud full-time. So hello and welcome to Dr. Yoho. How are you today?
I'm great, Niranjan, and you're welcome to call me Robert. And if you don't mind, I'll call you by your first name too.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm excited to have you on the show and really delve into elements of your background, your history, your understanding of how you see the world today, but most importantly, the craft that you have mastered in who you've become, not only from the medical world, but the being you've become from all the experiences that you've garnered.
Okay, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So in brief, I am a physician, or a retired physician rather, with standard medical training. I mean, I've been trained for decades. I started when I was 25. I think I graduated from medical school, and I did 4 years of training, and then I went into practice first as a family physician and later as an emergency physician for I don't know, 3 years or 4 years. And after that, I branched out into private practice, the family physician thing. And then I finally ended up in cosmetic surgery. And so my career is interesting. It's all documented on dryoho.com. And a lot of people have used that as a template to get into cosmetic surgery. But that's at an end now. I retired 3 years ago, and for 4 years I've been writing. And I wrote 2 books, Butchered by Healthcare and Hormone Secrets. And lately I've gotten into studying COVID and the vaccine and that stuff because I think that's been an unmitigated disaster. And my focus has almost gone worldwide instead of just on the US, which is what my Butchered by Healthcare book was about. And that thing was, I studied hormone therapy because I was administering estrogen and progesterone and testosterone primarily to my women patients, who were, many of them were over 50 by the time I retired. And a lot of them were just suffering with menopause. And so, and I caught a few premature menopauses even in their late 30s. I mean, it was remarkable. They had hot flashes and everything, and all their labs were 0. And so simple administration of those hormones was almost miraculous for them. And of course, men respond too. A lot of men over 50 and even younger have testosterone problems. And so I became aware that the FDA had essentially destroyed the science. They destroyed the science surrounding hormone therapy. And they'd put these black box warnings on all the standard hormones, and they were fraudulent. And basically, unfortunately, through my reading, I found out that the FDA and Big Pharma worked together to essentially push the drugs into expensive patents. And it's unbelievable. They use statistical manipulation. They corrupt their research subcontractors, and they hide studies that don't promote drug sales. That's the Big Pharma. And the pharmaceutical companies are the most corrupt industry in history, as measured by their settlements with U.S. federal prosecutors, and this is billions of dollars a year. And Pfizer, of course, is one of the top offenders. So the whole thing kind of sucked me in, and I learned about the medical journals that are total prostitutes. Their editors are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars each year by the medical industry, and corporate ghostwriters write 95% of their articles, and the authors, the quote authors, are paid huge fees just for the use of their names. And in law or business or government, bribes like these could theoretically result in firing or criminal prosecution, but it's accepted practice in healthcare, and these payoffs are simply disclosed as conflicts of interest. So I got into medical corruption step by step, and I studied the subjects, that are the chapters of my book. Big pharma, the insurance industry, various kinds of surgeries, various medical specialties that were tremendously corrupt and essentially dominated by the financial interests. And then I wrote my books, and then later I got convinced that the COVID thing was a fraudulent enterprise. And I mean, it's a terrifically unbelievable story. So that's where I am today, and it has been an evolution, a personal journey. And right now, I don't, I'm retired. I made enough money so I can afford to live at a low lifestyle standard, and I work on my writing and podcasting full time. I try to do a podcast every day, and if you search for my name and podcast, you can turn them up, but they're a little repetitive. For you, it's all new.
Yeah, well, it's definitely interesting shares that you have, because I have listened to some of your pieces, and I will add the links to your website, your book, and the podcast and so forth in the show notes, so people can look at those and have a listen and engage with you on that. The process in itself of living life experiences garners some really interesting results and awarenesses about yourself. So while you're on this projection of uncovering and unearthing some of these fraudsters and the system we live in, the corruption and everything that is very prevalent, if you are open to looking at it from a different lens, what do you believe about yourself in this moment as you look at all of this?
That's a broad question. Okay, so my basic philosophy is that life is a struggle, and if you expect it to be easy, you're going to be disappointed. And you've seen an outline of my personal changes from, kind of irresponsible kid into medical trainee, into professional, into family and husband and family responsibilities, and finally now into broader feelings of responsibility for the trajectory our country and our world is on. So I mean, I'm a small animal in the grand scheme of things, Naranjan, but I feel like I have a responsibility to speak up about the corruption. And since I've had time to study full time, which has been about 3 years, I have just, the scales have fallen from my eyes so many times. And now I am completely distrustful of the mainstream media, the institutions, our government, and most of all, the medical literature. I don't know whether you've seen this, but there was a British Medical Journal editorial in July of 2021 that said, "Time to assume the medical literature is fraudulent until proven otherwise." And that's really true. You can't trust Google searches, for example. I mean, Google is the center of the censoring cabal. And you have to be very careful about believing anything, because so much of the internet are what's called link farms, which is you search for a disease entity and you get all kinds of marketing things that look like science. So it's very disappointing, because 15 years ago, the internet was a wonderful place. It was a tremendous reference. But now the people who believe in it are, I think, kind of captured and hypnotized. So you have to look for sources that are independent, such as BitChute and Rumble. And to read, Substack.com is a blog platform that is, as of yet, censorship free. Now, we're all afraid that it will vanish, but I have a Substack blog. They're all the first name, last name of the author, and then Substack.com. Mine is robertyoho.substack.com. And you can find your favorite authors there who have figured it out and are using that platform. It's free, but you can make your subscribers pay if you want.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And of course, there's a lot of trash on Rumble and BitChute, but but you can find the real story there.
What do you, for somebody who is maybe new at this lens, or maybe opening up to a different perspective or a different vantage point, because they've seen what's happened in the world in the last 2 years. It's kind of just gone belly up, literally. What would you say to those individuals to be open to clicking on your blog post or clicking in your podcast and listening to that?
How do you find the truth? That's your question. And the answer is you have to turn into a seeker, and you have to study it for yourself. And you have to realize that most of the established sources, the establishment sources, are selling some insanity. And if you're interested in medical research, I suggest starting by reading my book. And you can listen to half of it free on YouTube through my website, and both books actually. And that's your entree into medical science. And then after that, I suggest the best Substacks as to what's going on right now, I think, are Alex Berengson's and probably Steve Kirsch's. But you'll get a lot of messages, and it's almost overwhelming if you subscribe to those two. But they're excellent writers, and they're comprehensively knowledgeable. And also Robert Malone. If you're interested in what's going on with the pandemic and so on, I suggest looking at Joe Rogan's interviews of Robert Malone and who's the other guy? We'll put it in the show notes. There's also a Rogan interview. Now, I'm not a great fan of Rogan. I think he's the whole thing is a little slow, and I have to listen to it at double speed. Yeah. And you need a Spotify subscription in order to keep it from being insane with all the ads, although there's still ads. But there's another one with Epstein about how Google censors and how they alter search results, which is very important to understanding the world today. Mm-hmm. I mean, the social media apostasy, the social media degradation of their content and censoring of their content is the most outrageous trend in the world today, in my view. I mean, it prevents people from understanding and becoming more active. The world law system is based on one thing: the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And we're the only country that has it, that as far as I know, but it's what keeps everything in line, and it's the basis of our entire system, and that's freedom of speech. And these companies in collusion together have partially abridged it in collusion with the governments. And it's the biggest outrage of our time. It was only clearly apparent for the last 2 years, but they've been doing it for decades, progressively more. But we still have free speech in America, and you in Canada, to some degree, we can get on podcasts and talk about mm-hmm. things. Right. But I'm hoping that an outrage is going to turn this around in the United States, perhaps politically, perhaps some other way.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, that's for sure. But it's equally interesting. Everything comes to a boiling point. And it comes to a boiling point, be a tipping point where it gets so blatantly obvious and in your face that you can't miss it. So while we know Google searches and the manipulation of media content and everything was happening, I would probably even venture to say 10 years, maybe even 20 years. We know it's been going on for a long time, but it's not been as obvious. So while the public or the individuals, you and I even, have become a little more tolerant, they're pushing the boundaries of that tolerance to, okay, what does the world look like now? And how much power and control can we have? But the bigger question is, somewhat like some of your patients that you have had in the past where you regulated their hormones, what is the tolerance that was needed to create that balance? Because ultimately, I feel everybody's craving a sense of balance in life.
Well, it seems that the narrative of today and the problems of today are being driven by a group of people, very wealthy people in the world, and some nations, mainly China. And the best way to understand it is to read two different books. The first book I commend to you is probably the number one worldwide bestseller for the last 4 or 5 months. Do you know what that is?
Not off the top of my
That's
head.
RFK. Yeah. That's Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s The Real Anthony Fauci. And that thing, that sold over 1 million copies. It has 12,000 Amazon reviews. Most of them are 5-star. And it will help the listeners figure out what's going on. COVID-19 and the Global Predators by Peter Breggin. And you can be introduced to both of these people at their websites, right? Mm-hmm. RFK Jr.'s is the Children Health Defense, and Breggin's is BREGGIN.com. And again, his book is COVID-19 and the Global Predators. And he puts together a unified theory, and with a tremendous amount of evidence, 1,000 references and so on, about what is actually going on. It's very hard to understand this stuff unless you get into this alternative media and you start reading. And Amazon as yet doesn't censor these books for the most part. They censor a few things. They've censored a book about the central bankers that is not available on Amazon. And the bankers are part of this problem and part of the direction. And so essentially what these people are trying to do is burn down our economic system so they can have more control. And this is a big leap for some of your listeners, I'm sure, but the evidence is clear. And if you look into my work through my Substack and my podcast, you can progressively understand it better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The information's all out there, but I often feel and sense that individuals who are maybe agreeing to the narrative are now seeing what the paid media is projecting out there, maybe want to take a more critical look at what the situation is, and to look at life from the other side. If you can be objective in an argument between a sibling, a spouse, a partner, a colleague, then why can't we be as objective on the bigger issues that are actually controlling our lives?
Well, the part of the motive for what we've been seeing is to keep everybody divided and keep everyone from understanding what's actually going on. Absolutely. And you're right. We are seeing a lot of people who I would have described as complete idiots wake up, right? And this includes the most influential news commentator in America, who's actually a comedian. And you probably have seen him on television. His name's Bill Maher. Mm-hmm. Well, this guy actually woke up and he understands, 2/3 of what's going on now. And he's using his influence, which he just sort of considered the whole thing a joke before, but it was a bad joke. And now he's using his influence to educate people gradually about what's going on. There are a lot of people like that. And even some of the leaders in the COVID, anti-COVID, anti-vaccine movement, such as Robert Malone, he's a physician, and he woke up. He's actually the inventor of the messenger RNA technology for the vaccine. Yeah. And this guy is now entirely on the side of trying to keep this horrible technology under better control and keep it away from our children and the rest of the populace.
So to take it a step further, in bringing the power back to the individual, without that sounding too cliche, bringing the power back to the people, what does it look like from your perspective? And I'm directing this maybe a little bit more from your experiences of regulating hormones for men and women, of the work that you've done in the past to current day, of how can I look at life in a different way, but how can I take back the power and tap into something else, this greater awareness, this greater something that maybe spurred you off on your journey to delve into this undercurrent, what was undercurrent world now is finally surfacing.
All right, so I have to quote Eisenhower here: pessimism never won a battle.
Absolutely.
Right? So
yes.
We don't have any choice about what we're doing, because our feet are in the alligator's mouth now. If we stop struggling, we're going to be immediately eaten. But the hopeful thing is that a lot of people are waking up, and we are, we're working together to try to make the populace understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. And if everyone understands, the global predators have no chance, because they're a tiny minority. Right. I have to remain sanguine about our prospects, but it doesn't feel great for me. Okay. And it's a quest that we're on, but it's discouraging because of the gaslighting, the deplatforming. What a ridiculous word, I don't know how anyone can use social media, and I'm not on social media because I won't put up with the censorship. Some of my podcasts have been censored, and they just knock them down off YouTube. I have a son who works for Google.
That's even more interesting. But
yeah,
what do you believe your intentions are with all that you're uncovering, all that you're awakening and sharing with the world? What is it you want to offer to the individuals, not only to be educated, but is there something else that you would like as an outcome for people listening? And
okay, Niranjan, I'm going to have to make this a little lighter. Okay. And so I'm 68, remember. Okay, so there's a movie which some of your audience may have seen, named Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. And
yes.
In it, have you seen that?
I have,
and in it, Max is in the pig farm, and he's in the gulag, and he's sentenced to life. He's in prison in the pig farm. Okay. And they break out of the pig farm, and Max is on the engine of the train, which is escaping the area. And he looks at the conductor, who looks like he's totally insane. He says, "What's the plan?" And the conductor says, "There is no plan. The track ends in 4 miles." So okay. I've got a limited lifespan here. And I think I've already told you that my image is our feet are in the alligator's mouth. We have to struggle. So I don't expect things to be easy, and I don't expect the struggle to be over, and I don't expect to see the end of the story. But we have to try to improve things.
Absolutely. So it's perhaps shaking through this system that's already been created and shaking it from the foundation, so all the debris of this nonsense can fall to the wayside, while strengthening those who are presenting themselves and working for a mission, I want to say, of the greater good.
Well, I think that I think we're obviously in the midst of a financial disaster, and financial disasters inevitably become economic disasters. And I mean, I'm hoping we all have enough food and shelter to make it through the rest of our lives, because with this money printing, we are going to see the decline of our financial system. These are the biggest financial crimes in history, and they're perpetrated by the people running our federal government and the Fed, which is a financial institution. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's the most outrageous thing I've seen outside of the censorship. I mean, so we're going to have to see where it goes, and we're trying to put the brakes on some of it by getting the word out. Mm-hmm. And we've seen the softening of the COVID restrictions because this story has failed. This ship has been stuck at the dock and it's sunk. And I think we've been saved by a bell that was a natural bell called Omicron. In other words, it wasn't a purposeful save, and no one, but it's obvious to everyone that Omicron is the end of the pandemic.
Where do you go from here? You have 2 books in the making. You've already written a book. You're on a podcast. You're doing this committed to yourself full time. What happens next? And even though you say you're 68 and you've only got a short leg left, I kind of disagree. I think there's plenty of life in you yet to serve a greater mission of waking people up and bringing more awareness to the systems that we live in, and recognizing that there's something else also in play that has to create this balance of not only from the mental space, but from the heart space. And this is my language, of course. Yeah. So from the heart space, that union has to happen rather than the ego-driven formula.
The religious people seem to understand this the best. And I am not religious. I'm interested in Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius meditations. And so I memorized large swaths of that book, and it helps give you strength in difficult times. And I mean, these are freaking difficult times. And so I don't have any better philosophy than that. The religious people would, they've got various things they can talk about and so on, but I don't have that support.
Okay. And I say that not from a religious standpoint, even though I was born and raised in a religion. I kind of departed that process a long time ago. I come from it more from a spiritual perspective of recognizing that there is a higher power, whatever you want to call it God, universe, or something, but we know there is something greater than us. You had shared earlier that you feel like you're just a drop in the ocean. There's only you who can make that change, but yet the ripple effect that you have is tremendous. So the power that's within you is very visible. It is very palatable, that it can change other influencers and other individuals. So I say that from a place of spirituality, not from a doctrine religion.
Yeah. For those who are interested in Aurelius, you can find translations free online. I like the long translation the best, but there are newer translations, including a translation by a couple of brothers, whose name I don't recall, that a lot of people find easier to interpret. But it's 2/3 of it is very good. 1/3 of it is indecipherable to me. So you have to be patient when you read this stuff. It's a series of aphorisms that a Roman emperor named Marcus Aurelius used for his personal development. And he carried around his little book, and this thing was lost for 200 years and then recovered. And it became one of the 5 books that have been in continuous publication since the invention of the printing press. Mm-hmm. So, and those include, for a Bible, probably an Indian or Chinese work, right, and something like Machiavelli's The Prince. They've all been in continuous publication since then, mm-hmm, for 500 years, and no other book has.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with it, but I'm not surprised that it's got some huge amount of nuggets of wisdom in there that people can relate to and at least be open and receptive to. Looking at life from another lens, I think that's really the caveat of this conversation that I would like people to take away from is just sit in the other chair and see what the world looks like by sitting in the other chair.
Ryan Holiday's work has popularized meditations and Aurelius and Stoicism. And I'm not totally in love with him, but he's a fantastic writer, and I think some of his other books were excellent. And he has written 3 or 4 books interpreting and talking about Stoicism. So that's the easiest way to get into the subject. Mm-hmm. He has a free podcast and blogs about it all the time. He's built a platform on this 2,000-year-old material. It's amazing.
Wow. Well, I guess I'm a bit of a believer that history will repeat itself, and it surely has done, and it's shown itself in current day formula with current day tools. So it's interesting to see what the future is going to look like, but I am a believer that we're in control of that wholeheartedly.
I don't know what to believe, Niranjan. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
It's been such a pleasure, and I feel like there are other interviews in our future that we could delve into some other deep topics on how this world evolves and how we change as humanity. So thank you so much for your time and energy. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Niranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.